Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Two Doors podcast. I am here with David Lemphers. Dave is a co-founder and CEO of Maincode, an applied AI research company operating at the frontier of intelligence. Maincode explores the intersection of augmented decision-making, symbolic reasoning, and agentic systems to create tools that help people navigate complexity, making better choices, and move the world forward. Their mission is to discover and deliver new forms of machine intelligence that enhance human cognition, not to replace it. A distinguished technologist and entrepreneur, Dave has built a global career across Australia and the United States. He has co-founded and successfully exited 4 startups and held executive engineering roles at EasyGo, makers of Steak and Kick, Microsoft, and Amazon Web Services. He holds multiple patents in AI and machine learning and serves as a strategic advisor to both private and public sector organizations, including the Australian Sports Foundation. Dave earned degrees in computer science and software engineering from Swinburne University of Technology and law from Monash University. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alexander.
How do you feel when you hear that? Because it's very impressive, right? We're talking patents, we're talking exits. Like, yeah, how do you feel?
I mean, I don't think I think too much about it until, I'm hearing it played back. And I think what I feel is hugely grateful to having had so many opportunities, presented, to me and the chance to have been at some incredible places and, just been on some incredible journeys. But it also just brings back so many memories and stories and, stuff that never makes it to the resume.
Yes, because you've done some impressive things with Azure as well, right? Like, if we're going to throw back to the United States, and I mean, we've just glossed over patents, but yeah, tell us a bit more about Azure.
Yes, look, I think that was in fact, it feels a lot like it feels at the moment with AI. I think that, cloud computing was very new at that stage. So this is now going back to 2008. And, Amazon had released AWS in 2006, and Microsoft was very conscious of the fact that if they didn't do something to enter that market, it was going to be a one-horse race. And, when I arrived there, one thing that really struck me was they were very clear about the fact that if anyone was going to disrupt Microsoft, it was going to be Microsoft. And I think that same esprit de corps has carried Microsoft through now to like 50 years of, being in the market, which is insane. But it serves as a really interesting lesson that when you look at the AI space today, it's very similar that the work that's being done has not really reached a point of disruption yet. And I think, much like the scrappiness of a, underdog, someone, certainly no one thought was going to have a place in the race, and now arguably is number one in cloud computing. Serves many lessons and kind of motivations, that feel very relevant today.
And you must see those trends happen as well, right? Like, tell us a bit about Maincode and what you're doing there, because last time we spoke, you blew my mind, and I started thinking about life in a different way, and I was like, it's very impressive what you're doing, and yeah, you're doing some cool stuff. So tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so Maincode, we're an applied research organization, and our goal is to really explore the frontier of AI research, really seeking out those, generational capabilities which haven't been discovered yet. I think what's super exciting about it is, and people always ask me, like, what's got you excited? Why are you excited to be part of Maincode? And I think it's because, I entered the industry, 2001. So it's like 24 years of being around this thing. And while I've had opportunities to experience very new ideas to the places I was at, I was never doing anything where they were new to the world. And, when I think about the early days of scientific discovery, what it must have been like for the folks who were actually discovering brand new things that had not been discovered by humanity. In AI, we actually have the chance to do that. And to be part of that in my career, knowing that this is the first time it's ever happened and it will never happen again, where scientists, researchers, engineers can come together and actually discover something that's never existed before in a way that really changes how the kind of trajectory of humanity. And I think it can't be understated that AI in its current place is absolutely that, scientific domain. So yeah, and to be doing it in Melbourne and in Australia to put Australia on the map is incredibly exciting.
Yeah. I love it because I love the tech companies here. And it's like we've had some heavy hitters that have gone global, but it's like we need new blood still coming in, and you've got the tracks behind you, so I'm excited. And how do you keep that blend of research and execution go well? Because from what I've seen, like a lot of people who have got PhDs that try to get into doing more pragmatic work, they have a bit of an issue because they've been allowed to do whatever they want that's not very commercial. Whereas you get other people who have been in the industry and it's like, no, we execute, we do this. So how do you manage that blend?
Look, I'm not going to pretend that there's like a playbook or anything like that. I think what we've discovered is that the very traditional linear process that has occurred around product discovery and product market fit, I think that works in well-established domains where the thing you're trying to identify is what is the unmet need, what is the feature that maps that, build it into a product and market and sell it. I think this industry is very different because it actually starts with what's capable, like capability led. So what ends up happening is it doesn't become a or, it becomes an and. So we take a more nonlinear approach where we have applied researchers who are coming up with novel ideas and experiments, and they're running experiment sprints. They're looking at general problems in the space and saying, if we needed to discover this capability, how would we approach it? And I'll give you a good example of that. Today, one of the limitations of large language models is they're largely feed forward. So they don't have an ability to bring information back in real time per person and then adjust their recommendations. And they really are just generating the next token in the sequence. They're not looking at it as a decision process. So we want to really understand that better. So the AI research scientists are looking into that. At the same time, we've got the user research group who are out there working with humans, trying to understand how humans use AI today. So the classic one is you're pasting your tax documents into ChatGPT or your medical documents and going, what should I do, right? And so we're really focused on helping humans answer the question, what should I do next? As opposed to make me a picture, of a dog on a comet. And so what happens is when you bring both of those signals into essentially like a TMUX, right? And it's like both of them have the same priority, smash them together. What's going to happen is we're going to match capability with those unmet needs of how people expect AI to be. And then in our iterative process, we bring in design engineering, we bring in systems engineering to start building those out. But the great thing is, because we're working with some of the tip of the spear engineers, they're not limited by, can I do this in React, or can I do this on top of an existing framework. They're capable of going, if I have to build a brand new compiler, I've got the skills to do it. Or, like we had a conversation this morning about what if we needed to move away from GPUs and move towards a more customized hardware platform built on FPGAs, right? And so it's that level of thinking we're applying, which is going to enable us to discover novel capabilities and build technology that just hasn't existed to date. And that's super exciting because departing from the double diamond is actually really, a powerful step forward.
Yes. And at risk of my own intelligence, what is an FPU?
So one of this is actually one of the frustrations when you start working in this space, and I'll kind of lay it out from where the current state of the market is. So
brilliant.
The way large language models work is they have to know everything about everything to build the model. And to do that, you have to essentially train it back and forth. So if anyone's ever come across backpropagation, which is like one of the major building blocks in deep learning, it's this idea that the deep learning network essentially tries to do the thing you want them to do, gets to the end and goes, how did I go? And you go, you kind of got that close. It goes back and changes everything and then tries it again. And that evolution, that back propagation, happens on GPUs. It's largely, big math. And, when you're building a massive large language model, you need huge amounts of GPU. So if you're not aligned with a Microsoft, Amazon, Google, they've got a bit of a monopoly on the advancement of that technology. So everyone else who, outside of people like DeepSeek and stuff like that, everyone else who's like, I'm doing AI, they're just wrapping those APIs. Unless you're actually training foundational models using millions and millions of dollars of GPU, you're not actually contributing to that space. So this is where I think the benefit of being completely independent off some larger tech company's agenda is we're not trying to sell ads better, through, like Google is, or we're not trying to sell our compute platform like Amazon is. We're able to say, well, what if we design novel model architectures which depart from the current thinking around transformers and attention mechanisms? And in doing that, if we can reduce the training and reasoning requirements, at the hardware level and actually custom build everything down the stack, we're eventually going to get to that level of being free of the GPU. And so then the question is, what do you put there, right? Is it a CPU? Is it a, TPU? Is it a custom piece of silicon? And so yeah, the field programmable array, they're really great because they're a general hardware piece that you can program to act like a piece of silicon. So even though they're expensive, they offer us a pathway to be free of the need for like this maximalistic GPU kind of approach.
And what's fascinating is you've been at these larger companies and you've got this perspective of being at Microsoft, being at AWS, being at EasyGo. You've seen these and you're at this grassroots level, which is very exciting. And I'd love to talk about in terms of the engineering and leadership side. So how do you high performing engineering teams, like, how do you create these? Because obviously you've got experience exiting four companies, but like, do you look for certain traits? Like, I know we had a great conversation around behavior.
Yep. So I'm a big believer in behavioral qualities. I believe what someone knows is less interesting than who they are. I think growing up in very, what I would consider toxic interviewing environments, like the 8x1 at Microsoft, right? Like 8-hour-long technical interviews back to back with random arbitrary problems like your classic, computer science, data structures, algorithm style stuff to, you've got a jet plane on a treadmill, at what point can it establish enough lift on the wings to take off? And you're like, am I going to be doing this? And it's a proxy and a replacement for effectively technical people not being great as human detectives, right? So what I learned very early on is we establish a set of principles, like these are the principles of Maincode, and we approach people as intellectuals. So we're never going to give someone a leet code. We're never going to reduce someone to some test that they can do online. So we invest the time in really getting to know them. What is the career trajectory they want to take? What are they passionate about? What are they curious about? And I'll tell you right now, Alexander, the number one thing that matters is, does someone essentially look at the stars and wonder what's beyond it? If you don't find those people, it doesn't matter how smart they are never going to go beyond the frontier. And so, yeah, like the way we do that is we hire for those traits, and then we give people complete autonomy, like high agency. That's where you're going to get the most out of incredible people. And then that's all you have to do. And then treat every single person like a founding hire, whether it's the first person, the 1,000th person, like it has to be dealt with that intensively. And it means you grow a little bit slower, but the outcomes end up being way more magical. And then the people are really excited to come to work and work with those people because they tend to be far more supportive and are kind, and I think it's been said over and over again of the brilliant jerk syndrome, but it's really true, right? Like if you have someone who just produces so much, but they suck, like you're going to erode the rest of the team pretty quickly. And yeah.
I think the core word there is team. Like you've said, it's like, and kindness comes through, felt, and curiosity you were saying there. And just, I always think that you should bring value. Like they should bring value, but their own opinion. And obviously you've got to get the core team correct. Just like the Chicago Bulls with like Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Rodman, but then there's always the people that you don't necessarily remember, but they were part of the core team of champions.
Absolutely. And again, I think where we're going right now, having people who are super curious and brave and don't have those insecurities that you see in a lot of brilliant jerks. At the end of the day, they know that they did something well and then they hold on to it for the rest of their lives, right? And you never see repeated, wins from people like that. Like they just did one thing and then they just bully everyone else. And so you end up getting a very low performing team that's not very agile. And I think that when you think about Maincode, it's complete opposite. Like we always joke, right, that we hire people who scare us and make us feel uncomfortable. But the other thing as well, though, Alexander, is like when you, and this is going to sound quite trite, but it really is genuine. When you are truly in service to a great cause, it changes the game completely. And from the very start, when Ed, who's our owner and major, stakeholder, when we started talking early about Maincode and 100-year company, like want to be around for the next century as we grow and build and change the landscape, both in Australia, but globally. What strikes you is that it's going to be multiple generational hires that happen, and we have to take our time to hire right and make sure that the people who are coming on recognize this incredible opportunity to truly invent something that does not exist today. And it can't be understated because there's never been an opportunity in the world, for example, Melbourne, to say we discovered this novel architecture which unlocked this brand new capability. Like that's never occurred in our domain. And I think that the other thing is if companies like Google, Amazon, Microsoft are putting everything behind this, it tells you something. Like they aren't the type of companies that will risk the farm for just anything. This is real. And it's not a hype cycle. It's a true opportunity and a brand new frontier. And so I think hiring people against that is how you make sure that you build, a high performance team.
It's true. And you've scaled teams in the US and Australia. Like what difference do you see in the talent and the mindset and the pace?
I used to think that the folks in the US were better than everyone else. And it was largely based on measuring their perceived output, Apple, Microsoft, Google, like these kind of companies. I think what I've understood now as we've changed the way we talk to people is it's still grounded in this idea that it's resource scarcity. So in the US, and I'll kind of, relate this to my own experience, in Australia, I don't have to do much to be comfortable. Like I can go get a job at any of the companies in Australia and I will be okay. I'll own a house. I'll send my kids to school. I'll be safe. In the US or any of those places, because again, I think China is a really interesting example with the DeepSeek work that they did, right? That if you have people who are deeply conscious of the resource constraint and the amount of effort it goes in, what it is, it's not that they work harder, they're more ingenious, and I think there was a time in Australia's history where we were very ingenious because we had to be, but then globalization and industrialization came along and we suddenly didn't have to be because we could use the natural resources. We had to buy that stuff. So at times when we invented a lot of really interesting stuff, that's kind of slowed down. But now what I'm understanding more and more is that there's a shift occurring. And what's happening is we've got some incredible people, like some of the smartest people in the world. But what's happened is they've made a choice not to enter the industry because the industry is boring. Like no one wants to go work on a glorified newsletter app. No one wants to work on a glorified to-do app. They want to work on really meaningful things. So they stay in academia. where they really are working on cool stuff. And that's where we see the similarity now. Because if you talk to someone like this morning, as I was saying, right, like talking to someone out of Berkeley who's working at NASA, or talking to someone who is, coming out of, Harvard and MIT, working in a research, lab inside the school. And then you look at someone at Melbourne Uni, they're actually on par, like just as smart, as capable. The decisions they make are the same. Like, don't want to really, this was a mind blowing conversation. Candidate was like, actually don't want to work at NASA anymore. Highly bureaucratic, not really getting much done. Don't want to go to OpenAI and Google because I already have friends who are there and they're not happy doing, minor updates to things and sitting in endless meetings. And so they're looking for an option and an alternative. And so it's nice to be able to talk to people in the US or Australia or the UK and have a normalizing effect, which is like, yeah, like Maincode will exist in all of these countries. And if what you want to do is bring this incredible research capability to a place where you can actually build things and own them and see the results, then great. But I think it changes because when you move out of applied research and AI and you move into more like app dev, that's where it's a little bit different, because now you don't actually need so much novel thinking and discovery. You just need people who are really, really good at coding against the documentation. And honestly, now that you've got things like, large language models that can do that, that's kind of shifted things a lot. So I think what we're going to see in that talent conversation is that's going to become heavily commoditized, and it's going to drop down to the old days, right? Wozniak in the garage. You have to create brand new, not yet seen capabilities. That's what's going to define your business. Today, the old days of just being like, I've got a great idea and an execution plan and I can go to market, like the 4 startups, won't ever happen again, right?
And it has to evolve, though, doesn't it, as well? Like, I heard someone say about that you're going to be paid for the level of your thinking, and then it will change to your level of your care. And so it's like, we're in this like new era, right? It's like the whole iPod mentality. I didn't know I needed those musics in my pocket, and now they're here.
Yep. And again, I think this is where capability-led engineering and product is just such an unknown field, because honestly, outside of some of these companies at the very start, but I would argue like Facebook and Google did not start from a capability-led model. I'd probably only say Apple, and some of the hardware companies like Samsung and, LG, and these companies that had to invent brand new scientific and technical capabilities to light up the things you wanted. But really everyone else just did another spin on HTTP documents on the web, right? Like, and so I think the next couple of decades of even startups is going to change, because all of those folks who wrote checks on the idea that someone had hustle and grit and was just going to, execute their way to the top, the game's changed now, and, they're going to struggle. They're going to struggle because those companies aren't differentiating anymore, and they haven't developed enough muscle to understand what a good investment is versus a bad investment. And so I think we've got some lead time for those organizations who are early, to make some really good, hey, while the sun shines.
Yeah. I mean, it's all change, isn't it? I love how big you're thinking, though. You're talking generations and impacting generations of doing it. And it's like, the landscape is evolving. And what about in terms of some of your hiring? Like, how do you evaluate technical leadership during an interview, like especially soft skills, vision, influence, or adaptability?
Yeah, so our interview process starts with a 15-minute call with me. So we believe deeply in, again, we should hire people as if we're hiring co-founders. So I think we're very thoughtful about who we speak to. And then, I have 40 something calls a week with potential candidates. And in that call, what I'm really trying to understand is alignment with our vision. So how do they feel about what we're trying to do? Is that aligning with things they've already thought about? Is this the type of high agency, high ownership role they're looking for? So we get aligned on that, and we hear their stories as well, which is incredible. In that what we're looking for is that curiosity and that passion. I have a dream. I have something I've loved my whole life. I want to keep, investigating and learning about that. Like, that's all we need to hear. Then the next thing is we have a take-home task, which is different for every single role, but it actually has only prompt is use this as a chance to imbue and infect us with the thing you're most passionate and curious about. So go away, and if you're a user researcher, it may be a question you've always wanted to answer. If you're an AI scientist, maybe it's a model architecture that you've always wanted to show someone. Like, show us the thing that makes you light up. And then we jump on a 30-minute call. We go through that together. Again, what we're looking for is who they are. Like, where did this come from? Where does this go? How do you respond to questions? If I don't understand something, or if I disagree, like, what's your response, right? And we're looking for curiosity, kindness, humility. And then we invite them in, and everyone in the company has to speak to them and pass a vote. So this sounds crazy, right? As you start to get to, but if it might take a full town hall for 1,000 people to welcome this person into the family, but if you don't do that, you aren't creating a structure that will persevere essentially and sustain for 100 years. And if I was someone coming into something really special, I would want everyone to know who I was. And if I was inside a company that's special, I'd want every one of the people I work with to have a voice or a vote. Now, obviously, at a certain scale, it can't be unanimous. But I think, and different people with different tenure carry different weight. But I think this idea that the village comes out, right, and welcomes or doesn't welcome this person in is actually a core part of our journey. But that's it. You meet someone very senior in the team for 15 minutes. You do your take home, which is an expression of yourself with a very short review. You meet everyone in the company, and then that's it. There's no need for a leak code, show me how tail recursion works, do some kind of like HBDI assessment. Like, none of these things in my experience have ever been an indicator of talent. But I can tell you one thing: everyone who was a game changer, generational player, were all super kind, super curious, super lovely to be around. That was what I remember about them. So that's what we hire for.
I love that. And also hunger. I sense hunger has to come through, because hunger is intrinsic. And that's what you're screening for, right? When someone shares their story or their vision, you can pick up on nuances if they've done something really quite, like you were sharing with me, you met someone from the SAS earlier.
Yeah.
And then there was someone else that was like, hey, there's OpenAI, but wanted to chat with you guys a bit more. It's like, people can sense that from the interview process, and it puts a great first step and that brand image out there.
Yeah. And look, I've been in large scale, high growth teams. Again, at Microsoft, when we were going from 20 to 2,000 people, you can't, when that's the goal, you can't invest that level of time to recruit people. But as a result, it's a little bit more of a shotgun approach. You're expecting people are going to churn out. You're going to expect people to not deliver. So you're kind of spreading the risk. I don't think that's a authentic, honest process to treat people with. I'd rather put the work in early and disqualify people out of our process. But what it also means is you might get through 50 people who aren't quite there, and then you get to the one person who matters, that generational hire. Those people are very considerate and thoughtful. They are not going to jump for the free lunch, the, people and culture-led, karaoke nights. They don't care about those things, the superficial window dressing, the theater of, proprietary and high performance. They don't care about those things. They're a lot smarter than that. And so what they look for is the real signal. So if you're not giving that out, you're not really a lighthouse, right, in all of that fog. So I think we focus on, let's be a laser beam, as opposed to a flashlight. And then let's let these people, see us right through the fog. And look, if the rest of the companies gobble up 99% of the available talent and leave us the 1% of the folks that actually matter, then totally fine. Just as if with the market, take 1% of this market and make it sound like it's 100% of the market and just leave the rest, for us.
I love your analogies as well. The flashlight, the laser beam. It's brilliant.
I mean, this is stuff that people kind of play back to us, right? Like, they say things like, I can tell in your vision or your website, like there's a quality that the 2 a.m. in the lab, right? Which I tell you what is one of the most insane signal points like it was something that came very personally and nostalgically from my own experience and the rest of the team, right? We all reflected on like that 2 a.m. in the lab was the most special times that we all remember nostalgically. We reminisce about those times and want them again. Just put it on the website. It's been one of the most emotionally powerful parts of the process where people say to us is so much so that we ask people to share those 2 a.m. in the moment, part of the call is like, what was that moment for you? And they'll tell you this story of how they were working on this project with a friend and they were just deep in the algorithm and they were trying different things, and you see that glint in their eye and you're like, but if it's the person who goes, no, I never really had a 2 a.m. in the moment, well, cool, like that doesn't mean anything about you, but it just means you're not a main coder. And I think those are the kind of things that cut right through the noise and the fog, right? And they hit people right between the eyes and they wake up and they go, crap, and I'm proud of when we get into calls with people who have offers from OpenAI and they go, like, let me think about this. That's it. That's fine, right? Like these are the big behemoths. And if we even have a chance to make you pause, we've got a chance,
Oh yeah. No, you're definitely going to do it because you don't want to attract everyone. You want your right people. Like for myself, I'm an author, I'm a national champion in my sport. Like I get on a wavelength with certain people like you because it's like you talk about those things, but some people don't relate and you don't want those people, right? Because what you're building is the core out so then you can duplicate and scale. And I've got a question for you as well, Dave. So how has your view of engineering leadership evolved from your early days to now?
Oh, what a great question, matey. So first of all, like my early years in industry were, I think like a lot of people, shaped by circumstance and environment. So my first job was, you're very young, graduate in a very established hardware engineering team and run largely by expat Americans from Texas. It was at Mobil Oil. And so they had a very clear way of doing things. Leadership was command and control, hierarchical, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. And then I followed my boss to Mazda, which was, again, very typical of a Japanese style structure. So, lots of nuance, lots of cultural bleed through into the management structure. But what you found was that there wasn't a meritocracy. It was like you had a position, you worked your way up and accumulated influence through power and seniority, which never quite made sense to me. But then when I got to Redmond, it was pure meritocracy, right? You're working for a Aussie inside of Corp R&D. They take skunk works, secret squirrel to the nth degree. And there's a rebelliousness about their leadership quality. But one thing I took away from that was all of the leaders were credible. They were all ex-engineers. They could jump on the tools at any moment if they had to, dust off the rust and get going. And then what I noticed was as I went through and saw the most incredible teams, they were the most humble, the most curious, the most passionate. They could tell a story. They had true vision. Those were the folks that I would like, okay, like, it's the Ray Aussies, it's the, investors who were very thoughtful about how they made their investments. And I was very fortunate actually in our first startup in the US. We raised money from Eric Schmidt and we got a chance to attend a number of the events through his fund and to watch him talk about how he saw the world and vision. You learn so much from those kind of people. And so, but then I also had a classic machine learning model, right? Like you've got the label data, which is really good. And you got the ones where you're like, oof, don't ever want to do that. And I saw the arrogance, the cruelty, the hubris, the insecurity, that ultimately masking, this kind of bravado and like toxicity. And I was like, oh, I don't ever want to be that or be part of that. And I learned my own experiences too, though, Alexander. Like I remember unfortunately, um, believing that good management, good performance management leaves bruises, and it should be a contact sport, and you shouldn't be afraid of that kind of like intellectual contact. And I now see that that was just my own insecurity, and it took time to grow as a person, to realize that that doesn't actually build emotional safety and does not create teams that are highly agile and with high agency. And so, um, yeah, I think bringing that to Easy Go and then bringing that to Maincode has been a learning experience for myself. And I think the more you do that, the more you are able to be self-critical and identify those blind spots and weaknesses, yeah.
It's brilliant that Daniel Goleman's The Emotionally Intelligent Leader talks about how, as a leader in a new environment, you need to renew yourself because it's new demands of you. It's like we can't take a fixed mindset of, oh, I was this at this company and I'm just going to go here and unplug and then do it. It's like, no, what's needed of me? So I recognize the evolution of you becoming, from that institutionalized to getting around people that are actually proving worth through meritocracy. That's what resonates with me, rather than just, oh yeah, you've got to do what I say because I'm the manager.
And to kind of take that along its kind of journey for myself. The other thing is I realized you have to choose worthwhile causes, because because otherwise what happens, and that was my experience, was if you choose things that have high status or high potential for yield, what you end up focusing very inward on your own performance and your place at the table. And you start doing really odd things, to elevate yourself and get in the way of really great people. But when you choose a really meaningful cause, it doesn't actually matter anymore. You don't need to be the smartest guy in the room, the top of the tree. In fact, it changes and you go, I just want this to happen. So actually it makes more sense to get the amazing people and support them, because they're going to create the world you want to go live in. Whereas when the world is so little, it's about your status and identity and, your ego. It doesn't matter who's around you or what you're doing, because the cause is kind of meaningless. And I think that's where even my association with the Australian Sports Foundation has been such an incredible journey, because I'm working with some of the smartest people I've ever met. Like one of the board members, is just an incredible brain, and she's a very senior partner at one of the big consulting firms. And every time she brings her considered thought, and viewpoint, I'm just like, wow. And and she's a board member on a a non-for-profit, that's at grassroots sports. And so when you bring people together around a meaningful cause, you attract some of the smartest people and you let them be smart, and caretake that thing through to, happening. That's where leadership becomes an incredible journey, and you're no longer a leader, right? You're just the person who is hustling as hard as you can to keep the lights on one more day, right? And
that's what's rewarding, right? That fulfillment, that legacy you leave. And we'll bring this into land. I wish we had more time. I've got so many more questions from Cloud. We might have to do feature 2 in the next season, but quick fire for you. So this is for fun and insights. Books that changed how you lead.
0 to 1.
Most underrated Aussie startup right now.
Maincode.
One piece of tech you wish someone would build.
A teleportation machine.
Remote work, blessing, curse, or something else.
These days, blessing. Yeah. Meet people where they're at.
I love it. And any final thoughts, any wisdom you'd love to share with anyone?
I mean, look, I think the thing that I end up saying to people a lot these days is start to reconsider what success looks like. I think we've spent a lot of our lives optimizing to get a score, to get a grade, to get that job. These are all lagging indicators. And instead, answer the tougher question. What are you most curious about? What is the thing that you are insatiably curious about, how it works or why it exists? Go follow that. Learn whatever you need to learn to understand it better. Wherever you land, you'll be infinitely happier and successful than you'll ever be before. And that may have sounded like wishful thinking in the old days. I think what we see now is that actually is the new frontier. So yeah, I think that's what I'd definitely leave with people.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Now, I've